This is the story of Cesar Neftali. He was born in Mexico, and he allegedly formed part of a satanic cult back in the 80s. This is his story. This is a warning that evil exists. Sometimes we see it in the movies. Sometimes people think that evil is just a myth. But this warning is very real and is meant to inform anyone, especially the young ones, to be careful with whom they choose to trust. Everything started when I was a child. Some of my family members told me that I was an unwanted child. My father had a son who died, and suddenly my older brother was born. And then I was born, but I wasn't a planned child. My mother had tried to take a lot of specific herbs to terminate the pregnancy, but nothing worked. I suffered a lot during my childhood. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old, and my brother and I went from house to house with my mother's side of the family ever since. I had some older cousins whom I had to share a bed with. My cousins abused me since I was 5, and from that point on, all my innocence was destroyed and my childhood ruined. I grew up with much resentment and bitterness. As time went on, they would threaten me that I could not say anything because otherwise they would hurt my brother, and I wanted to protect him. Years later, my father returned, and my mother gave us the choice of whom to live with. Both my brother and I decided to go with my father. I always felt I lacked love from my father, and I was always seeking his love and affection. But now reflecting on it, my father could never give me that love, since he wasn't given that as a child. My father gave us a lot of freedom, and no attention. Sometimes I didn't even come home, or would get home super late at night, but I never got in trouble. Eventually, my father moved us to a state close to Mexico City. I was 12 at the time, and that's when the nightmare began. I met a person outside of school who claimed to be a teacher. He was very nice, warm, and gentle. I was enamored with him. He was like the ideal father I wish I had. He told me he would make me his best student and paid me a lot of special attention. I would later realize that this was one of the many tactics that they used to lure young people into their cult. They specifically preyed on kids from the streets and from broken homes. There came a time when the teacher took me to his home. He lived in a beautiful mansion with a lot of strange decoration. He had statues of gargoyles and other strange-looking characters scattered all about his estate. One of the first steps of my initiation was that he gave me a concoction that smelled like rotten meat. I think it might have had drugs in it, but it didn't taste like anything. This was the first time he threatened me. He said he would hurt my family if I didn't do what he said, and provided me with all their addresses and names to prove it. I just went ahead and drank it. I still continued seeing him out of fear and love as well. 4 months later, I was due to have my initiation on a Sunday night. When I went to my teacher's mansion, there were more than 150 people of different ages attending the party, all men. At first, it seemed like a normal party. However, some time passed, and they took me to a basement that was more like a cave. There was a large round table with some guys surrounding it, including a priest wearing all black attire. They laid me down and took off all my clothes and then tied me up. On the table, they brought over animals and sacrificed them, pouring all of their blood all over my body. Boys attending the party began to lick all of the blood off my body. I laid there in shock. I thought it was a nightmare. The priest put his hand on my head, and I fell unconscious. When I woke up, they all congratulated me and covered me with a blanket. They said I did great. I continued assisting the cult, mostly out of fear. They taught me different things about occultism and paganism. I was very active in the cult. I reached a pretty high level within the coven. The teacher, who was actually a dark priest, had taken a liking to me because he thought I was special. I tried to escape this cult 4 times. One of the first times I planned to cross the border to get to the United States. However, they found me, beat me, and sent me back. I was almost beaten to death when they found me, as I had broken one of my packs. At that point, I fell into a great depression. Every time I would try leaving, they would find me and torture me. The fourth time, I moved from Mexico City and went to stay with some relatives. The cult allowed this due to my studies, but they continued to make me go and participate in their covens. The cult knew I wanted to leave, and I believe they had me possessed. One day, out of nowhere, I began vomiting blood and got very sick. My family had me go see multiple doctors that had me do several exams, and they all came out normal. However, I kept vomiting blood, and then my family started experiencing paranormal activity whenever I was around. They decided to take me to a priest. They found Father Hugo, and he had several years of experience and studies in exorcisms and cases similar to mine. He said my case was one of the most extreme and exhausting ones he had ever encountered. The process of liberation took several years. The cult did not want to let me go, and did everything in their power to keep me with them. It also took a long time for me to believe in Christ and His power. It took 4 years for me to be rehabilitated, and now I've become an advocate for people who have gotten entangled in a cult, to let them know that it is possible to break away from them and free yourself. Cesar's done some interviews with more details regarding his experience in the cult which operated out of Mexico. Do you believe in his experience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. And on another note, as I've been saying lately, if you have your own stories that you would like us to cover, please feel free to share them by dropping us an email at dragonvin@gmail.com. Thanks again and have a good night.